Hi, this is Lenny Labrizzi along with Mark Latour, Dominique Burrell, and Charlie Olson. Welcome to the Mostly Good Environmental News Report, where we cover positive environmental issues, milestones, and activities with both local and global importance. Very often, the news about the environment is not good. We hear about climate chaos in all of its manifestations: drought, wildfires, floods, species loss. But there are good things happening in the environment that are not usually reported in the news. We have some interesting positive news to tell you about in this podcast. We hope you enjoy listening. And if any listeners have ideas for stories we should do, please let us know in the comments. And now Dominique will tell us about reintroducing woodpeckers to an Air Force bombing range in Florida. Dominique?
Translocated woodpeckers thrive on Florida bombing range and boost endangered population. Florida's Avon Park bombing range is teeming with life. Over 40 at-risk species occupy this 106,000-acre expanse used by the U.S. Air Force for training exercises. Conservation biologists are using the range to test something other than weapons, innovative strategies to save threatened species. Using decades' worth of monitoring data, researchers are looking back through time to understand the outcome of interventions designed to rescue a population of imperiled red-cockaded woodpeckers. Their results demonstrate the potential for translocations, the practice of moving individuals from donor populations to isolated at-risk ones to reverse long-term population decline in endangered species. Translocation can help restore connectivity between isolated populations and bring dwindling species back from the brink. When used in concert with land conservation, interventions can help dwindling communities recover. Due to the lumber industry's cutting of pine trees, red-cockaded woodpeckers, once abundant from the American South to the eastern seaboard, have nearly disappeared from their shrinking pine savanna habitat. They are now confined to small, disconnected pockets covering only 3% of their historic range. In fact, destruction of these ecosystems has placed hundreds of species at risk of disappearing entirely. The only reason that these populations are still around is because of the continued collaborations with conservationists. The Avon Park Air Force Range contains over 35,000 acres of pine savanna, providing a well-protected band of habitat for threatened animals and a proving ground for complex conservation strategies. It is one of several protected areas around military installations where the Department of Defense and other federal agencies work with state governments, conservationists, and private stakeholders to meet conservation goals. Leveraging this opportunity, researchers, in collaboration with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the U.S. Air Force, introduced 54 red-cockaded woodpeckers from 6 donor populations into the range's pine savannas between 1998 and 2016. These translocations increased the population size and genetic health. The introduced birds contributed directly to higher population counts, and the translocated birds and their descendants tended to have higher rates of survival and reproductive success. The findings indicate that reproductive success is highly associated with total nesting years, and translocated birds tended to nest for more years than the locally hatched ones. About 70% of the translocated woodpeckers survived in the population after their release, and many formed breeding pairs with local individuals, providing a boost to the genetic diversity of the population. The team hopes that these positive results incentivize land managers to consider the long-term benefits of translocations and monitoring for additional imperiled species. These strategies and the partnerships that support them have implications for other at-risk species, too. Analysis of genetic material helps detect and minimize inbreeding, reducing the burden of on-site monitoring programs to track bird nesting and reproduction. Using genetic monitoring tools allows scientists and land managers to be more precise when deciding how and when to use translocations. And that is good news for declining species. And now, Charlie will tell us about the relationship between wolves and aspen trees in Yellowstone.
Thanks, Dominique. Today, we found out that Yellowstone's aspen trees are finally making a comeback thanks to the fierce appetites of gray wolves. At first glance, it doesn't seem at all obvious that wolves have any relationship to aspen trees. But the more we study nature, the more we realize that everything in nature is somehow connected to everything else in nature. And the restoration of gray wolves in Yellowstone's National Park has been essential in reviving the population of aspen trees. Quaking aspen, as they're better known, are one of the few deciduous tree species in the northern Rocky Mountain ecosystem, is once again thriving after suffering severe decline during the 20th century. This is a remarkable case of ecological restoration. The decline in aspen growth occurred at the same time as a surge in Rocky Mountain elk, which had lost a key predator following the elimination of wolves from the region by 1930. Elk and other herbivores, who mostly eat leaf-like food, partake in intensive browsing, which is the eating of low-hanging leaves of high-growing trees, as well as eating the soft shoots of new babies of these trees and the soft, low-leafy parts of shrubs. That browsing menu, however, includes the rather tasty young shoots of aspen, which of course means that the elk eat the new saplings and prevent new aspen trees from ever growing. Now that wolves have been reintroduced, about a third of Yellowstone's aspen stands have large numbers of tall saplings, which is a remarkable change from the 1990s when surveys found no baby saplings at all. Increases in height of young aspen have also been driven by a decrease in elk browsing. The recovery of aspen trees has wide-ranging impacts across the entire ecosystem, including increases in beaver populations and the return of cavity nesting birds. The situation really began improving following the reintroduction of gray wolves in the 1995 to 1996 period, as these animals supplemented the other predators' efforts of bears, cougars, and human hunters outside the park. The reintroduction of these large meat eaters initiated a recovery process that had been shut down for decades. In 2021, the researchers examined aspen stands. Stands are those kinds of groups of genetically identical trees interconnected by a shared root network. Almost half of those stands contained a new cohort of small trees, making and marking the first documented growth of aspen canopy foliage in northern Yellowstone since the 1940s. Meanwhile, with the reintroduction of the wolves, elks changed their foraging behavior by shifting from this landscape of wolves to less risky areas. At the same time, aspen recovery has not been uniform across Yellowstone, and this is due to more growth of carnivorous or non-leaf trees taking the place of these and in competition with the aspens, and increasing numbers of bison, which is a constant constraint to aspen trees in some areas. Overall, however, the reintroduction of wolves has been very positive, with increases in beaver populations, cavity nesting birds, and most of all, to the aspen trees. And that is good news for the environment. Our next topic is about pythons and the Everglades. Mark is going to tell us about how these pythons are spreading through and beyond the Everglades.
Invasive species such as pythons wreak havoc on ecosystems, outcompeting native plants and animals. The Burmese python is one of the largest snakes in the world. They live near rivers and swamps, and can weigh over 200 pounds and reach 20 feet. They have few predators, and they will eat a wide variety of prey. Pythons became established primarily due to their release into the wild. They were imported from Asia and sold as exotic pets. As the snakes grew, owners found them too difficult to manage and released them into the Everglades and other marshes. Because of pythons, populations of raccoons in the glades have declined by 99%. Possums have declined by 99%. Bobcats have declined by 88%. Wading birds such as herons and egrets have declined by 90%. Marsh rabbits, cottontails, fox have all disappeared, and young deer, frogs, and muskrats are frequently on the python's menu. Conservationists have stepped in to balance the ecosystem. Spy pythons with radio transmitters are now used in the Everglades National Park. These collared males lead scientists to female pythons, which can lay 100 eggs at a time. The plan is to destroy more pythons. Allowing invasive species to go unchecked is a disastrous concept for biodiversity. There are now 36 threatened or endangered wildlife species within the glades, so python control is essential to save those species. There are several ways to take local action. For example, Florida residents can legally hunt and kill pythons on public land, and they can report pythons to the Fish and Wildlife Commission. Perhaps that commission could organize a few weekends a year when groups of hunters can go safely into the glades and kill pythons. We don't want this python problem to get to the point where children and infants cannot play safely, and where pet dogs and cats get eaten. Pythons are pushing farther outside the glades every year, and are now less than 30 miles from Miami. So even if the import of pythons and anacondas has now been banned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, buying and selling snakes in the U.S. is still a big business. Some snakes sell for thousands of dollars, and facilities are breeding more and more snakes all the time. Do we really need dozens of snake species imported into the U.S. and bred to create more snakes? Isn't it time for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to put an end to these imports and breeding facilities? Let's work with the national park officials, the Wildlife Conservation Commission, legislators, and local hunters to put an end to this python problem before these apex predators make their way to Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Naples, Fort Myers, and Orlando, and before they come for you.
Thanks for that report, Mark.
Next, Lenny's going to tell us about the BlueBelt concept and how BlueBelts can minimize the damage of storm surge from hurricanes. Lenny?
Thank you, Mark. The good news is the Staten Island BlueBelt. I am being a bit of a homer here as I live on Staten Island, but the BlueBelt is such an ingenious solution for dealing with stormwater that I'm going to tell you about it anyway. In fact, urban planning and landscape architecture students from all over the world have visited the Staten Island BlueBelt to see firsthand how this stormwater drainage system works. Staten Island is the least developed area of New York City with just under 500,000 residents. Its geography includes ponds, streams, and wetlands. When it came time in the early 1990s to come up with a plan for dealing with stormwater in the southernmost part of the island, which did not have storm sewers, the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, proposed creating a natural drainage system by enhancing the existing wetlands. As with any untested system, there were numerous objections from residents. The DEP and its commissioner at the time, Albert Appleton, made sure to listen to the residents, made some changes to the plan, and kept the residents informed throughout the process. The BlueBelt would become an example of a project that had multiple benefits for the environment, local residents, and the city as a whole. By creating the Staten Island BlueBelt, open space was preserved and enhanced. The city avoided the cost of installing storm sewer pipes in the streets. BlueBelt construction costs were much lower than storm sewer costs. These enhanced wetlands also increased the biodiversity of the area. As an added benefit, property values increased as the BlueBelt helped improved the quality of life for local residents. While most of the initial construction was completed by the end of 1993, more Staten Island stream corridors received the same treatment, and BlueBelts have been built in other parts of the city. Today, the Staten Island BlueBelt encompasses 400 acres of freshwater wetlands and 11 miles of streams that drains about a third of Staten Island. One new term I learned in researching this article is forebay. That's spelled Forebay, which is a small pond or water holding area where trash and silt can collect and be kept out of the larger ponds and streams. BlueBelt maintenance crews clean out the forebays on a regular schedule. As with most stories I report on, this is another excellent example of local solutions to local environmental issues. While this worked for the specific geography and topography of Staten Island, other locations may be able to mimic some of the BlueBelt strategies and create natural systems that work in their area. That is good news. And now we are going to hear a few brief little snippets of bad news amidst some good news about the environment. Charlie, over to you with some bad news.
According to new research, the 2024 mass monarch butterfly die-off in Southern California was caused by pesticide exposure. This adds evidence to the theory that pesticides are partly behind drastic declines in monarchs' numbers in recent decades. Researchers discovered hundreds of butterflies that had died or were dying near an overwintering site where insects spend their winter months. The butterflies were found twitching or dead in piles, which are signs of neurotoxic pesticide poisoning. Testing of the insects revealed an average of 7 pesticides in each, and at levels that were lethal. Another bad environmental episode. Mark, come on, you got to give us another good one.
Okay. So a New York court has ruled that the State Department of Health broke the law by refusing to help protect Owasco Lake from agricultural pollution that is reaching the drinking water of 45,000 people in Cayuga County, New York. The court ordered the state to work with local governments to keep contaminants out of the lake and ensure clean, safe water for households that depend on it. Owasco Lake is plagued by algal blooms from agricultural runoff, including manure. These blooms, which release toxins linked to liver damage and cancer, have forced beach closures and costly water treatment efforts, burdening local taxpayers. The court decision is a major victory for public health and environmental protection in upstate New York. More bad news, Charlie?
More bad news. Sorry about that, Mark. And Lenny and Dominique, fishermen have caught a large number of octopuses this season due to warming sea temperatures, which have seen over 7 degrees Fahrenheit above normal in some areas. The warmer waters have benefited octopuses, jellyfish, and sea bass, but have hurt cod, salmon, sturgeon, and plankton populations. Fish adapted to colder waters experience many negative impacts as temperatures rise, including reduced oxygen levels, disrupted reproduction, and increased disease susceptibility. Apparently, they're not able to do the dating process completely. The marine heat wave poses a broad threat to the ocean ecosystem, triggering algae blooms, dead zones, and boosting toxins and pathogens that can also sicken humans. And if we happen to like the heat as we go to Florida and California, that is not what's happening to certain species of animals. This is bad news for the animals. Mark, please give us a little bit more good news.
All righty. So once nearly extinct in North America, bobcats are making a comeback. These felines are reclaiming their place in nature and helping to reduce diseases like Lyme disease. It starts with what they hunt. Mice are carriers of the dreaded Lyme disease. They pass it to ticks, which then infect humans. But by preying on mice, bobcats keep both mouse and tick populations in check and help humans avoid illness. So it's critical for humans to return the favor by protecting bobcats. Habitat loss, vehicle collisions, exposure to rodent poison, all continue to threaten bobcat survival. In fact, 94% of bobcats found dead have been exposed to rodenticides. Safer alternatives can offer effective rodent control without endangering bobcats or other wildlife. So if we want to end Lyme disease, let's lay off the rodenticides and bring back the bobcats. And now, Lenny, back to you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for listening to the Mostly Good Environmental News Report. We hope you enjoyed hearing some good news. If you like what you heard, please share with your friends and listen to more episodes of the Mostly Good Environmental News Report wherever you listen to podcasts. A special thank you to Charlie Olson for the original music composition we are using for our intro and outro. We'll say goodbye with that music.